Okay, welcome back to episode 22 of Ag Inspired Conversations. My name is Tommy Heffern. The concept is simple: to have interesting conversations with people doing inspiring things in agriculture. My next guest I got to know well. I slept with him for 6 weeks in the same hotel room as we travel the world doing our Nuffield Global Scholarship. And it's James Stacey. Good evening in Australia. Good morning from Ireland, James.
G'day, Tommy. How you going?
Good, James. You're somebody I was lucky to spend a lot of time with and have had many chats since then. I definitely think there's a great blog in you around agriculture. I haven't seen it start yet. Many people will know you because you have a large profile on Twitter and you're very active on that. You're not afraid of sharing your views of the world. You're also farming, but give people a little bit of background. Who is James Stacey?
I'm James Stacey. I think I'm 46. I'm not sure. Yeah, my wife Rachel and 3 children here in South Australia. We're at Langhorne Creek, which is 60 kilometres south of Adelaide, which is the capital of South Australia. So we farm 210 hectares of irrigation and dryland farming here. We grow lucerne for horse production and grow some cereal crops as well. So that's what we do here. But our main focus on our business, we did operate the business as a dairy farm for 20 years, which we finished up in 2016. So I could go and do a Nuffield Scholarship and sleep with you, Tommy. And now our business is mainly focused on the domestic pets, horses and alpacas and sheep and things that people have in the sort of peri-urban area between us and the city of Adelaide, which has got 1.5 million people in it. So, yeah, we irrigate with centre pivot irrigation, like from groundwater and surface water, and we do hay contracting as well. So at the moment, we're, like my son Zach and myself, are flat out doing hay, but the weather's been a bit unusual for this part of the world, pretty wet in October, and it's caused us a bit of grief, but now we're getting into it, and the hay job's going pretty well at the moment.
James, dairy farming, 20 years. Do you miss it? What was the move out of it? Did you your time as a dairy farmer, did you enjoy it, or were you glad to get out?
I love growing grass and I hate milking cows. So dairy farming for us was a good stepping stone to help sort of build wealth and grow our business at the time. But as everyone knows, dairy farming is a pretty hard business to be in, fairly grinding. And sort of I'd gone through a number of price cycles and I could see another downturn on the horizon, and we needed to invest significantly in infrastructure for our dairy operation. And that wouldn't really add value to our property here. So we decided to pull the pin. And you can see here, I actually worn, this is an old T-shirt, it says United Dairy Power. That's the company we supplied. And it was 2015, it was owned by a fairly flamboyant guy from Melbourne. He'd rock up to the dairy meetings and I think he's Italian, had his white shirt, long flowing greasy hair and gold chain on. And like you thought, man, this guy's a bit dodgy, but he was the highest payer for us for a fair while. And the business was sold to a Chinese entity, and they managed to take it from a pretty successful business to going bankrupt in 7 months. So when that business fell over because they were paying us pretty well and I couldn't see a lot of competition for our milk, I thought that was going to be the end of us milking cows, and we transitioned out of the dairy industry over the next sort of 12 months after that happened. So dairy was good to us, but I was just over it and didn't want to invest the money in stuff. And I like growing stuff, so I like growing hay, and if it's for horses or for dairy cows or whatever, I just like growing stuff. So that's what I like doing.
What are you growing at the moment? Give us an idea of the crops that you're growing on the farm.
Under the irrigation, we've got lucerne growing on that, and we've got some ryegrass as well, and some oaten hay that we make for the horse market. And then on our dryland property, we grow medic, which is like a clover. We supply that into the dairy industry. There's still a few good dairy farmers around here that want quality hay, so we supply that and lucerne hay to them as well. And then we grow a bit of wheat as well. But we also we've got a big square baler, a round baler, and a small square baler, which we've just got a bale barron on that so we can do more hay. So during hay season, we do a lot of work for ourselves, and then we probably do about 5,000 to 6,000 bales for other farmers, like the big bales. So that keeps us busy for a while. And I've done that all through like the last 20 years, dairy farming as well, because it's been a good source of income, and also getting hay for payment for doing work for other people and stuff. So it's been a bit of a drought proofing exercise, because where we are, it's only 360 mil rainfall, so it's pretty dry, and that's sort of a winter Mediterranean winter type rainfall pattern, and over summer's dry, so you need the irrigation to keep things cranking over. So that's what we're doing at the moment.
See, there's a big conversation, certainly in Europe, and you'd be very aware, and you keep a very close eye on sort of global agriculture, global politics. There's also the big movement to regenerative agriculture and lowering our inputs, going back to the soil-based, soil health as a key focus. What's your opinion on all that, James? That regenerative agriculture movement, is it something that's taken off in Australia? Is it something you need to consider? Because obviously adverse weather and climate change is going to be a big factor for you guys in your businesses, isn't it?
Yeah, I struggle with the whole regen agriculture thing. Like today, Zach and I just went and checked the hay crop out of a farmer that we do hay for every year, and he's a 60-year-old farmer, extremely successful, runs sheep and cattle and cropping, and I jokingly call him a regen farmer because he oversows pastures into cropping paddocks and stuff like that. He's just a good farmer. Like, he's not a regen farmer. He just runs livestock in his system, and that's how he does it. And I think in Australia, there's a bit of there's a lot of chatter about regen agriculture, and a lot of it comes from the more pastoral grazing systems where country's been flogged out for years, and they've suddenly worked out that if you actually let plants regenerate and don't actually graze it to the boards, you can actually recover from a dry spell a lot quicker. So I think it's a bit of a furphy. Like, in our business, we use poultry manure. Like, we've got broiler sheds just up the road from us, so we use quite a bit of that to replace conventional fertilizer, and we also use biological soil conditioners as well. So, and that seems to work pretty well here. So, like, you're
a regenerative farmer yourself, then?
No, I'm not. I'm just a good farmer, not a bullshit artist. Like we just try and, like, the thing for us, we need our hay, like we need the horses. The horse is our customer. Like, yes, there's predominantly a lady that feeds the horse, but the horse tells the story if the hay's any good or not. And so we want customers coming back and to our product because they like it. So we try and have the soil balanced and get things right. I think soil is definitely something we focus on, and I think it's something agriculture more broadly needs to focus on. Like, you can't just farm hydroponically on your dirt. You got to make sure you're looking after the dirt and getting the best out of it and looking after it, because I think healthy soils, you're going to grow a product that's healthy for humans or livestock. So that's what we sort of are trying to focus on here. And I think doing the Nuffield probably did, I didn't really, like, in Australia, we don't have nitrate limits or phosphorus limits because we've got phosphorus poor soils, and nitrogen, we don't go anywhere near the extent of what a Irish farmer or a Kiwi will go, because it just doesn't rain enough. So, and we don't have the runoff issues in this region. So that was an eye-opener for me to go around the world and see, like, the phosphorus limits in the Netherlands, and then the nitrate issues in the UK, and, like, I know Ireland, it's a bit of a hot topic, in New Zealand, and see what's going on there. Like, I was in New Zealand and went to a stream flow management type meeting, and the pressure on over there is huge around nitrogen. So, and I think, like, with our system, like in our dryland system, we use like the medic clover to build nitrogen in the soil for the following cereal crops. So we're doing those kind of things, and Lucent's a pretty good plant that it can look after itself on the nitrogen side of things. So just add the phosphorus and potassium, and you can do that with animal manures as well as conventional fertilizers. So that's what we're doing. But yeah, I think in some places the temptation just to pour on the nitrogens to grow more stuff, like in Iowa where we went on the Nuffield trip, like it's just insane the amount of nitrogen being used there, and then the impact on nitrate levels in waterways which are consumed by humans. It's just pretty scary what the future holds for them.
It's a big debate here at the moment. We're going to see very, very big changes in that area. COVID-19, just give us a bit of an insight, because you're in South Victoria.
South Australia, not in Victoria.
Sorry, Ben. Sorry, apologies for my poor geography. It's a big country. I can't get it right all the time. Tell me a little bit about COVID-19, because we hear a lot about what's happening in Australia, particularly New Zealand as well, around COVID control. How are things over there now?
Things in South Australia have been good all the way through. And I think and I know at the moment our Prime Minister on the international stage is trying to take a bit of credit for why Australia's in the position it's in. But I think a few things happened that were good, like our borders shut in February or March, I can't remember exactly when. And then like international travellers went into quarantine as they were coming into Australia and for 14 days before they'd be let out and stuff like that, which was good. But in Australia, like we have obviously the federal government, and then each state government has their own jurisdiction, and the sort of premiers can control borders and sort of the health system to a certain extent. So Scott Morrison, our Prime Minister, he was a bit more laissez-faire. He was wanting everyone to go. He went to the football on the weekend that Victoria shut everything down. So so we had some, like Victoria shut down more early. Like our pubs and restaurants and stuff like that shut for, it was probably only a few weeks. And then like we've gradually opened up, because there was a cruise ship that came into Sydney. It did a trip out of Sydney into New Zealand and back. And then the people dispersed off that, and they sent about 400 people around Australia with COVID. And that was managed reasonably well, and they traced those people and tidied them up. And then it's been a few international people. So like South Australia's been good. I think we've had like maybe 4 deaths and 2,000 COVID cases, which is pretty low. But the issue in Australia was over in Victoria, the hotel quarantine. It's alleged that the hotel quarantine, some people working in security took that home, and then there was a bit of an outbreak of COVID, and I think Victoria got up to nearly 750 odd cases a day at the peak. But they went full lockdown, like only like essential businesses. They even restricted meat processing plants and things like that. Everyone had to work from home. The schools all shut. But in the last sort of 10 days, Victoria's got 0 deaths and 0 cases. So really got it under control. There's like Queensland and New South Wales, they report 4 or 5 cases a day, but most of them are returned travellers that are in quarantine and aren't released until they're clear. So it's had a big economic impact on Australia, but the health impact's been small, and the ability for us to recover, like we're recovering now, like the economy is. So like wage subsidies were brought in for people that couldn't go to work or lost their jobs, and they're being wound back at the moment. So from my perspective, like it had very little impact on me. Like my wife Rachel's job, the food business she was working for, they shut down and were on the JobKeeper payment, and she moved on to a new employer in the food industry as well. So that was a bit of a transition for us, and the kids had a couple of weeks off school because they didn't want to go to school. They didn't not have, like, the school was still open. So, and I suppose the biggest person that was impacted out of our family was Zach, our son, because he was working he went to a cattle station in the Northern Territory, and because of the sensitivity about getting in the Indigenous community, the area where he was locked down quite hard, and he was on the station 450 k's from Alice Springs, which, if anyone looks on a map, is in the middle of nowhere. He was there for 3 months and they couldn't go in or out, which was pretty tough because like you're stuck with a group of people that you normally go to a rodeo or a camp draft or something, and you couldn't do anything. So, but that is over now. I think nearly all the state borders are back. At Victoria, still there's restrictions there, and Western Australia, they are not letting people in and out yet. And Western Australia, because obviously that's a big hub for the iron ore industry, and that's a driver of the Australian economy. So that's pretty important that that doesn't get screwed up. So, yeah, hopefully by the time a vaccine can be developed, we won't have any more outbreaks, and like the amount of COVID in the community can be managed, and it's not going to stuff our economy because like there's a health consequence and an economic consequence, and if you get them both wrong, well, your country's going to be going backwards for a fair while. So our biggest problem at the moment is Australia's seem to have pissed China off, so trade with China's become a bit of an issue. But
that's a huge element when you do travel. You do see the Chinese relationship with Australia they're a massive part of your economy, for good or bad, of different people, different opinions.
Yep.
So, what's it going to look like in the future, then, James? I know you have theories and you think and read about this sort of stuff. What's a post-COVID world look like from maybe an agricultural perspective and a trade perspective? Is it just impossible to know?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to know where things are going to be at. Like, COVID's such a hard thing to predict. I think, like for some countries that have just let it rip, it's probably going to mean their spending on the older population is going to be significantly reduced. And if you look at it purely from an economic point of view, or if you've got more productive labour units in your economy and less people that require support from government, or your economy at some stage should really kick off. But in Australia, we obviously decided to keep everyone alive, so that's not going to happen for us. And I think for Australia, the biggest challenge, like, yes, there's the China issue. China takes about 25% of our exports, and the agricultural exports, China's like, they've basically shut down the barley job. They're talking about all the wine jobs in a fair bit of trouble. Lobsters or crayfish, that's been shut down. Like, they're talking about wheat, but that's not happening. But they're taking a lot of beef and lamb still, because obviously the African swine fever and their reduction in meat production, they're taking that. But yeah, and China's backing off on coal out of Australia as well. So that is a bit interesting. But getting back to Australia's problem, it's not from my Nuffield topics, looking at urban growth and the impact of that on agriculture, and yet like our net immigration was sort of 300 to 400,000 people a year for the last 15 years, and that's gone to zero. So that's been driving the housing market in Australia. It also drives just general economic activity, because most of those people are young and productive working people. So I think our government will be very keen to get immigration going again when it can. And it'll be interesting to see where people come from after that, because with the impact COVID's had on like Europe and the US, I wouldn't be surprised if you start to see more people from countries like your own, Tommy, that might head out to Australia because they've seen how Australia's managed COVID, and they might say, see you later. Like, if you're in Boris's land, like, well, when we were in the UK 2018, like, it was pretty clear Brexit was going to be a shit show then, and they've just completely messed up their economic management and now the management of COVID. So yeah, like, it's still going to be a trading hub, but it's lost a lot of its luster that it did have, I think.
Yeah, it's phenomenal, Brexit, because it's kind of sitting here underneath COVID. Now, we are talking about it, but it's a sleeping giant that can actually probably have far more implications long-term economically, even for us, because we're so tied to the UK. And sometimes it's hard to believe some of the stuff that's happening, that from a Brexit perspective, that you're going, this can't be, like, who's in charge here? This can't be, who's thinking this out, or who's not thinking this out? It's going to have a phenomenal impact, and hopefully, and there's a lot of people hoping this, that we can get to some sort of a workable deal that won't impact both countries in Europe in a severe way. But I wouldn't like to be, at the moment, the way things are from a UK perspective, I would have serious concerns. You're interested in politics. You had a run at politics yourself. Why does politics interest you so much?
I think it's something that's ingrained in people. Like you go down the local bowls club, and there's my grandma. She was the president of it for bloody about 20 years. So it's just a thing in families, or just people show leadership and want to create change. And I think I just didn't think like country people being represented that well, and wanted to get involved and try and help represent people in a fairer way in the parliament. And like the second time I had a run, I got 30% of the primary vote, and the party I was running with, like a centrist type party, I think I lost about 45-55, so we got close on, because we've got a preferential voting system. So, and at that stage, like the party I ran for got 3 senators in, which had the balance of power in the Senate, in the federal parliament, which was pretty influential. And I think even if you don't win, having a go, and it was in a rural seat, like you get more mobile phone towers and more infrastructure put into that area because you put pressure on the local MP. So, but yeah, it's been interesting because like politics is pretty hard. Like you can see how a person is driven and wants to be involved in it, but you don't realize until you get close. Like, yes, I wasn't successful, but the closer you get, the more scrutiny and the more treatment you get from the media and the opposition, and that impacts on your family and the people around you, which I didn't really expect to see happen as much as it did. So it's sort of, I enjoyed having a go, and I am a political observer, but I'm really enjoying running my business, and the Nuffield's given me a bit of thinking time, talking to you in the middle of the night about stuff, which is all part of the Nuffield journey, which is all great. But it's given me thinking time to just focus more on my family and the business that we've got here. And like, as you know, like I always thinking about what things can happen, and to really focus more attention on what we're doing here has been beneficial for me personally and the business as well, which is good. But being involved in politics, you sort of get to, you have some influence over things, and then you just decide, no, you're going to just keep doing what you're doing. But I'm the chairman of a local water committee. I got back on that recently. So, and the water allocation planning, like water in Australia is the key to farming here if you're irrigation business. So it's pretty important to be involved in that and in the management of those resources. So that's what I'm doing at the moment, and like generally just shit stir on Twitter and add my 2 cents to a few things. So
James, right, so the one thing you alluded to politics there, because if you look, and maybe sometimes I wish I wasn't as interested in what's happening around the world, because and sometimes I just kept the micro focus myself. But like, there's a lot of challenges out there. Climate change, so many things. The COVID virus now, global population growing, socioeconomic issues, all these sort of challenges. We'll talk about Trump in a little bit. But so leadership's required. And you said it there. To get into politics, you get absolutely hammered. I see it over here with Irish politicians. Look, we've some bad politicians, but generally people do it for the right reasons. But it's so hard to get into it, and like it takes a certain type of person almost to go forward. And a lot of people then will say, no, this is not for me. I don't want this kind of crap on my family and my person. This person is good. Does it make it very difficult then for us to see great leadership politically, maybe at a national level or globally, because of that?
I think it definitely does. Like, there's a vacuum of leadership, and you'd have to look at the UK and the US at the moment to realise that's a huge problem. And I think the 24/7 news cycle gets people offside. And I think from doing a Nuffield GFP, you go and see people that are leaders, that are good business operators and could be successful anywhere, but they've just decided to operate their business or operate a business for someone else, and that's what they focus on. And I think, I don't know how you change that mentality, because you're just ending up with people who've gone through the machine of politics ending up in positions of power, and they're not necessarily the right people. But leadership is a tricky one in a democratic environment. Like you've got the leader of China, he does what he wants to do, and we saw a great business in China that was led by a Nuffield scholar who works well in the system in China, but he may maybe not work so well in a system in a democracy. So yeah, it's a tricky one, because you have to bring everyone along with you if you're making decisions as a leader. And a lot of people, and if you are a forward thinker, you will come up with an idea and put that forward. And at first, people will think you're mad and disagree with you. And then after a period of time, it'll turn out that you're correct, and everyone will be on board. But there's a bit of a period of time where you've got a fair few skeptics, and it's probably a bit like the Irish dairy system at the moment. Like, you've got people who are looking at alternative fodder production systems, using less nitrogen, more sort of inclusive. We've got our dairy tax accountant, Carol. He's putting pictures up of growing chicory and clover and things like that. So he's doing things a bit differently. And yeah, the mainstream might not see that as being what they want, but people having a go and looking at new ideas, they might be the ones that are actually the leaders. So we'll find out if Carol's a leader. I said he had a nice paddock of weeds, but he didn't appreciate that much.
You like storing it. Before we go to social media, because I want to ask you about that, because you are very interactive on that. The great Trump debate captivated the world. America, we traveled through it together. As a kid, I grew up and I loved American movies, the whole American idea. Liked history, World War II, America's role globally, and to see a country sort of spiral down to where it is at the moment, and that'll be my honest opinion on it. And Trumpism and what he represents, and he represents something that people can't ignore because it's significant. And now you have him saying he's not going to leave the White House. What do you think? I mean, from somebody who's interested in politics, this is just it's not good to watch from a global perspective, but it's fascinating. It has us all captivated.
Yeah. Well, Trump is a disruptor, and he used his profile to disrupt and get to become the president of the USA, which is a great achievement for him, but not necessarily for the country itself. And like, America's a fairly divided country between Republicans and Democrats. And we found that on the bloody plane from Washington to Iowa. And I had a lady sitting next to me, and she worked I think she was a lawyer in the health system. And I sort of asked a question of like the change of government, and she said, like Obamacare was great and Trump's going to ruin everything. And then this guy 2 seats up pipes up and said, have you spoken to anyone who's voted for Trump? And they proceeded to have a ding-dong argument for the next hour and a half on the plane.
I was 2 seats ahead of you, and I put on the headphones, and I said, I thought it was social media he stirs it up. This raging debate for about an hour and a half, all the way in our flight. So I put on the headphones and said, what a Stacey started back there anyway. So we saw it firsthand.
Yeah, and like, I spent 5 weeks in the US as part of the Nuffield travels, and I think the US, as much as it is a great nation and it's done great things in the past, and it can do great things in the future as well, but like, just the disadvantage you see in the US, like, and I sort of came away from the Nuffield sort of with the understanding of the country that looks after their most vulnerable is the country that has a heart. And in the US, because I took my son Zach for 3 weeks of my personal study, and we'd drive into a small rural town, and you'd see Zach and go, where's the hobo? Where's the vagrant? And you'd see someone pushing a shopping cart down the street like in a town with 400 or 500 people in it, and you still got homeless people in it. So just the disparity between the wealthy and the poor people in the US. And I think like the American system, like they run on the American dream of going from dirt poor to making a song and being number one and being wealthy, or coming up with an idea and designing an app or something and becoming wealthy. Like it's just how their system is just, it's not great for people. Like, in minimum wage being quite low, like you see a huge amount of disadvantage over there, which I don't think, like, other countries shouldn't aspire to be like the US in terms of that. Like, it's something that to see is quite interesting. And obviously guns and religion and things like that are fairly serious businesses. Like, because down in Louisiana, I spent a week down there with some farmers, and I was going to help do some cattle work, and the young fella said, "Oh, don't cuss when we go with these guys because they're very religious," and like it was quite strange to work cattle for half a day and no swear words come forth. But yeah, they're different. They're a lot different to what you think. Like, I think America is a great place, but it's just got some fairly serious issues, and I think Trump has just pushed people further apart from each other, which is a real challenge. And I don't know how Biden's going to bring them back together again, which, yeah, it's like two warring parties. And for an Australian, like, the whole gun thing is just weird. Like, you go places and there's a revolver under the seat and a rifle sitting next to you. And like in Australia, we had some gun massacres, and after that we changed the laws. Farmers had a bit of a grizzle, but automatic weapons and stuff were made very difficult to get access to, and it's really reduced any risk of gun violence. Whereas in America, it's just rampant. And like, we were in some taxis, and taxi driver was telling us how he'd been shot, or I don't know, some bullshit story. But
those stories are for our memoirs, James, for those 6 weeks. Not for public consumption. What was James? So where, if we think America, maybe the leadership and the challenges there is not somewhere we want to copy. Where do we look to for examples of great leadership politically?
I was fairly impressed with how the Dutch were sort of managing things when we were there. And that even gets to agricultural leadership. Like, the Dutch farming organisation has one chief, one spokesperson. And I think that's where agriculture around the world, like agricultural leadership, is just so splintered, and you've got different groups, and government are not sure who they should be talking to. And that, I think, something like that, and a country that, like, the Europeans seem to be able to work with parliaments with 4 or 5 different parties and different groups and get some stuff done. So I know the EU's got some problems, but the EU's got some cash as well. The French and the Germans are fairly wealthy, so they prop you Irish up, I suppose. So that's good.
So in a short, Europeans are the best, right? We'll take it on that one, right? James, talk to me a little bit about, you're well known because I think people, we're only getting a flavor for maybe some of the thinking, and you think even a lot deeper than we're having a conversation about around politics and life as well. Talk about social media and using Twitter. I do it myself, but I've stepped back a little bit. It can be a very angry place. How do you find social media? How did you get into it? And do you still enjoy it?
I probably have eased off a bit on it. I enjoy the platform of Twitter, and I suppose I just got into it and just got involved in conversations. Like, obviously, like a lot of people, I got into it to see what was going on in world news, and from a farming perspective, it is a great platform to see what is happening in different regions around the world before the markets react to a dry spell here, a flood here, or a market disturbance. So that's sort of why I got involved in it. And then, like, obviously, when I was dairy farming, it was like you put up topical stories and information, and you put up a few jokes, and you just put up stuff. And it's, for me, I suppose it's an outlet to communicate with other people in the world. And through it, I've met, like, I knew of you and had communicated with you before we met on the Nuffield, and like, it's opened up doors. Like, visited a bloke in France, Hervé. I stayed with him a couple of times. He's shown me around northern France, the battlefields where we've got relatives that died there. So that was pretty special kind of thing to do. And like, even in America, it's helped make connections. So I think for me, it's just like, farmers love looking over the fence at what someone else is doing and pinching good ideas, and Twitter is a great platform for that. And it's also a platform, if people have got some challenges, they can put up, like, I've got a problem with machinery, or what are your thoughts on this? And you can get feedback, and it can be complete rubbish and it can be good. And I think you're right. It has become a bit more toxic with the political stuff. And I've tended to, I still have a bit of a poke at that, but you sort of, I think you do modify who you follow so you don't get too much crap. Like, if you're just getting people piling garbage, so there's a lot of people probably unfollowed me because they don't want my crap. But yeah, it's just a platform. And like, I haven't gone out and schooled myself on how to be more effective at it. Like, you'll put a video or some picture up and it just goes crazy, and you don't know why, but obviously some companies pay a lot of money to try and make that kind of stuff happen. So yeah, it's a good platform. In Australia, a lot of farmers, we've got auto steer on our tractors and headers, and we need something to do while you're going up and back. So, and I've got better auto steer. I can go round and round with it too. So, but you got to keep an eye on what's going on so you don't run into anything. But yeah,
it's a way to consume. It's sort of how I consume my news now, and I have to be kind of conscious as well of not being dragged into my own bias, and keep an open mind maybe in what I read and who I follow. Life lessons. I've taken up a lot of your time this evening. Life lessons. I know that you, as much as you store and you take the mickey sometimes, you're a deep thinker. Life lessons as you've been farming over the last maybe decade. What are the things that have impacted you? How have you changed over the last 10 years? Nice, easy question.
Yeah, I suppose, like, when it comes to resource management of like water and land and things like that, my attitude, like, because I was involved in water allocation planning process for about 12 years, like, my attitude to the environment has probably changed to be give more to the environment than I probably would have in the past. So that's something that as farmers, we need to leave our farm in a better state than when we started, and our general environment. And I think we are doing that by managing our resources a lot better. That's sort of one thing in life. And I suppose, like, farming has its ups and downs, and social media has been a good place to sort of vent a bit of steam, and also put you in contact with people that can help with problems and get over things. And I think generally in farming, like, or whatever business you're in, see if you can find yourself some mentors. And it's like, I know that sounds a bit wanky, and I was involved in a program and I was asked to be a mentor for someone, and he's gone on from being working on a dairy farm to then now owning a farm, and now he's bought the next door neighbours as well. So that's been great to see. But I think, like, find yourself some people that are successful at what you want to do, and they don't necessarily need to know your mentor. But like, there's the guy that I spoke to you about that I call a regen farmer to wind up. Like, I've been doing his hay for 20 years, and it's like I speak to him probably 3 or 4 times throughout the year, and then like at hay time, it's a bit more extensive. But I consider him to be a mentor. He doesn't know that, but he's someone I bounce ideas off and gives me feedback, and I see what he does. And I think in life and farming, that's pretty important. I think the Nuffield experience too, like can be a pretty intense character, and I've got a fairly like strong personality traits, and I've had to modify them to sort of fit in with my family better and have better relationships with the people that are close to me, which I think the Nuffield is like, it's not a midlife crisis for someone like me, but was a good experience because I got away from the day-to-day operations of the business, and it was fairly stressful at the time, like doing the 8 weeks away with the GFP, but it gave me a lot of time to reflect on where I was and what I was doing, and that's been a great time. And I think as hard as it is to give yourself that time to come up with where you want to be, like, because and the Nuffield, it's great that it gave me that experience, but you should be able to do that without Nuffield as well. But you need to give yourself some time, because if you just, and I was working, like, I used to milk 200 cows by myself. Everyone thought Rachel, my wife, was a single mum at the kids' sport because I was never there. I just worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and just about, I look back on it now and I was mad. But like, you build wealth, you get ahead, but you just burn yourself out completely doing that. So yeah, and like, you've changed what you're doing with business, and now you just talk to people online and do Zoom meetings and stuff and make a living, apparently. So it's all good.
Yeah, life is interesting. I'm very lucky to get up in the morning, and I do more than that, James, now. But no, I'm very lucky to love what I do. But it's some very, very stalwart advice there. Giving yourself a bit of time out to think about what you're doing and focus on what's important. I still probably need to do more of that. What's the future look like? What's the next decade? We'll leave it on that. Have you any ideas where you want to be? Are you on the right track?
I think we're on the right track. It's been a big transition out of dairy from 2016 to now. We had, like, 2018 was the worst drought financial year we've ever had financially, and also I wasn't here for 4 months of it, so that tested the system pretty well. But I think we're moving the right direction with our supplying the fodder market into fodder stores and things like that. Like, Zach, our oldest, is he's doing his apprenticeship at the moment, like, because I did an apprenticeship when I finished school and stuff, but I've just said to him, if you want to come home on the farm, just go and do as much stuff as you can. So he's done cotton picking, like driven a cotton harvester. He's worked on a cattle station for 6 or 7 months, and like he'll be off again next year, and he's going to do agriculture at Marcus Oldman, Ag College. He'd do a 1-year agribusiness course. So I think for us going forward, we're going to continue to expand the fodder production for the sort of non-farm market, for the big pets. People have horses and things, and that may involve us purchasing a fodder store or opening a fodder store closer to where those people are in the future. And like, I want to spend 2-3 weeks a month. The idea of getting out of cows is trying to reorganize my life so I had one, and I want to be able to spend a month, a year away from the business to visit you in Ireland if we're ever allowed back, and just catch up with people. Like, a lot of people when they're young travel and really get into stuff, and I didn't do that, so I want to try and do that going forward. But I also want to bring the kids into the business, continue to grow the business. And like, my daughter, she's just about to finish school and she's off to design at uni, and I've said, do you want to farm? And she's no, so we'll help her out in her direction in life. But like, the boys love farming, so that's what we'll be doing. So
pretty good.
And,
I wish you continued success. I will see you in Ireland. Hopefully the kids will be sleeping by then. We didn't have a very successful night last night of very late. But I look forward to seeing you in person.
Tommy,
What?
when will you get a leave pass from Ireland, Tommy?
I don't know. I think I definitely want to go. I definitely want to go to New Zealand and Australia. But I don't know when that's going to be. Maybe cut loose for a month again. Have another midlife crisis. James, thank you very much. We'll be talking again. Great conversation. As much as you stir the pot, and I'm not afraid to have a strong opinion, I think you think out your opinions a lot, and you're a character with a lot of depth to you. And I've certainly learned a lot and have had a lot of interesting conversations, a lot of fun with you as well, that will remain off air until the later members of our life. Take care, James. That was super stuff, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Tommy. See ya.